Every single year, over 1 million wild birds descend on American farmlands and cause more than $2 billion in agricultural damage. Not from hawks, not from crows, from an invasive species that most people have never even heard of, the European starling. These birds strip entire orchards bare in hours, contaminate livestock feed with disease, and outcompete native species for survival. But here's the twist. This ecological disaster started with just 60 birds released in New York City over a century ago. How did one man's obsession with Shakespeare turn into a billion-dollar agricultural catastrophe that now spans the entire continent? In the next 30 minutes, you're going to learn the hidden economics of invasive species, the unintended consequences of romanticizing nature, and why this bird is both one of America's most destructive pests and, surprisingly, a growing commercial resource. If you care about where your food comes from, stay with us and let's investigate one of the most overlooked environmental crises in modern agriculture. The European starling, how 1 million invasive wild birds destroy U.S. farmlands with $2 billion damages every year. The European starling is everywhere in North America, and yet most people wouldn't recognize it if it landed on their car. It's a medium-sized bird with iridescent black feathers speckled with white, a yellow beak, and a habit of moving in massive swirling flocks called murmurations. Beautiful to watch, devastating to live with. Today, there are an estimated 200 million European starlings across the United States and Canada. That's more starlings than there are people in all of Brazil. They occupy every state in the continental U.S., from Florida to Alaska, and their impact on agriculture is staggering. Yet despite causing over $2 billion in damage annually, the starling crisis rarely makes headlines. It doesn't have the viral appeal of murder hornets or the controversy of wild hogs. It's a slow-motion disaster that farmers, airport managers, and ecologists have been battling for decades, while the general public remains almost entirely unaware. So why does this bird cause so much damage? European starlings are aggressive, adaptable, and they reproduce rapidly. A single pair can raise 2 to 3 broods per year, with each brood producing 4 to 6 chicks. They're also cavity nesters, meaning they compete directly with native birds like bluebirds, woodpeckers, and purple martins for nesting sites. But the real economic devastation comes from their feeding behavior. Starlings are omnivorous and opportunistic. They devour grain crops, strip fruit orchards, contaminate livestock feed, and spread diseases like histoplasmosis and salmonella through their droppings. In feedlots alone, starlings consume and contaminate millions of pounds of cattle feed every year, leading to substantial losses for ranchers. Add in the damage to vineyards, cherry orchards, and blueberry farms, and the numbers climb into the billions. What makes this crisis even more frustrating is that it was entirely preventable. The European starling is not a native species. It didn't migrate here naturally. It was intentionally introduced by humans, and the consequences of that decision have cascaded through ecosystems and economies for over a century. To understand how the European starling became one of North America's most destructive invasive species, you have to go back to 1890 and meet a man named Eugene Schieffelin. Schieffelin was a wealthy pharmaceutical manufacturer and a member of the American Acclimatization Society, a group dedicated to introducing European flora and fauna to North America. The reasoning behind this movement was partly scientific curiosity and partly cultural nostalgia. Many members of these societies were European immigrants who wanted to recreate the landscapes of their homelands in the New World. But Schieffelin had a particular obsession. He wanted to introduce every bird mentioned in the works of William Shakespeare to North America. It was a romantic, utterly misguided idea that would have catastrophic ecological consequences. In March of 1890, Schieffelin released 60 European starlings in New York City's Central Park. The following year, he released 40 more. That's it, 100 birds. They adapted quickly to the urban environment, and within a few years, they began spreading beyond the city. By the 1920s, starlings had reached the Mississippi River. By the 1950s, they had colonized the entire continental United States. By the 1990s, they had reached Alaska. Today, their range extends from central Mexico to northern Canada, covering more than 3 million square miles. Why did they succeed where so many other introduced species failed? European starlings are extraordinarily adaptable. They thrive in a wide range of climates, from the humid southeast to the arid southwest. They're not picky eaters, consuming everything from insects and grains to garbage and pet food. They nest in cavities, which means they can take advantage of both natural tree hollows and human-made structures like building eaves, streetlights, and highway overpasses. And perhaps most importantly, they have few natural predators in North America. Hawks and owls will occasionally take starlings, but not in numbers sufficient to control the population. The result is a species that reproduces rapidly, competes aggressively, and spreads relentlessly. The early warning signs were there. By the 1920s, ornithologists were already documenting declines in native cavity-nesting birds. Farmers were reporting crop losses, but there was no coordinated response. Invasive species management as a scientific discipline barely existed. By the time anyone recognized the full scale of the problem, it was far too late. The starling population had exploded into the tens of millions, and eradication was no longer a realistic option. Let's start with the damage, because it's extensive, and it touches nearly every sector of American agriculture. The most visible impact is on fruit crops. Starlings are voracious fruit eaters, and they have a particular fondness for cherries, grapes, blueberries, and strawberries. In states like Washington, Oregon, and California, where fruit production is a multi-billion-dollar industry, starling flocks can devastate entire orchards in a matter of hours. They don't just eat the fruit, they peck at it, ruining far more than they consume, leaving growers with unsellable crops. Some cherry farmers report losing 20 to 30% of their harvest to starling damage in bad years. When you're operating on thin profit margins, that kind of loss can be the difference between staying in business and going bankrupt. Grain crops are another major target. Starlings feed heavily on corn, wheat, barley, and sorghum, particularly during the fall and winter months when insect prey is scarce. They descend on fields in flocks numbering in the thousands, stripping seeds from plants and scavenging spilled grain. The damage extends to stored grain as well. Starlings are notorious for infiltrating grain storage facilities, contaminating tons of feed with their droppings and spreading pathogens. Then there's the livestock industry. Starlings are a major problem at cattle feedlots where they consume and contaminate feed intended for livestock. A single starling can eat roughly 1 ounce of feed per day. That might not sound like much, but when you're dealing with flocks of 10,000 birds or more, the losses add up fast. More concerning is the disease risk. Starling droppings can carry bacteria like E. coli and Salmonella, fungi that cause respiratory disease, and parasites that affect both livestock and humans. Feedlot operators spend enormous amounts of money on netting, noise deterrents, and other control measures, but starlings are persistent and adaptable. Infrastructure damage is another hidden cost. Starlings roost in huge numbers on buildings, bridges, and power lines. Their droppings are acidic and corrosive, degrading metal, concrete, and paint. In urban areas, the accumulation of droppings creates slip hazards and unpleasant odors. At airports, starling flocks pose a serious aviation hazard. Bird strikes can damage engines and windshields, and while starlings are smaller than geese, their habit of flying in dense flocks makes them a significant risk. The FAA estimates that bird strikes cost the aviation industry hundreds of millions of dollars annually, and starlings are among the most frequently struck species. Ecologically, the impact is just as severe. European starlings are aggressive competitors. They evict native cavity nesting birds from their nests, sometimes killing eggs or chicks in the process. bluebirds, tree swallows, woodpeckers, and purple martins have all seen population declines linked to starling competition. In some regions, the loss of these native insect eaters has led to increases in pest insect populations, creating secondary agricultural problems. But here's where the story gets more complicated. Despite all the damage they cause, European starlings also provide some unexpected benefits, and ignoring those would be telling only half the story. First, starlings are effective insect predators. During the breeding season, they consume massive quantities of beetles, caterpillars, and grasshoppers, many of which are agricultural pests. Some studies suggest that starling predation on pest insects provides measurable benefits to certain crops, particularly pasture land and grain fields. The economic value of this pest control is difficult to quantify, but it's not zero. Second, starlings have become an important game bird in some regions. In states where they're classified as an invasive pest, starling hunting is legal year-round with no bag limit. This has created a niche hunting culture and a modest but growing market for starling meat. Hunters appreciate starlings because they're abundant, challenging to shoot in flight, and can be harvested without the ethical concerns associated with hunting native species. Third, there's a small but emerging commercial market for starling products. Starling meat is lean, mild, and comparable to other game birds. In some areas, professional harvesters supply starling meat to restaurants, pet food manufacturers, and even bait industries. Feathers are used in fly tying for fishing lures. It's not a large industry, but it represents an attempt to turn an ecological liability into a sustainable resource. Finally, starlings have contributed to scientific research. Because they're so abundant and adaptable, they've been used extensively in studies of animal cognition, vocal learning, navigation, and disease transmission. Research on starlings has advanced our understanding of bird biology in ways that have broader implications for conservation and agriculture. None of these benefits outweigh the damage starlings cause, but they do complicate the narrative. Invasive species are rarely purely destructive. They integrate into ecosystems in unpredictable ways, and managing them requires understanding both their costs and their contributions.
So what keeps the European starling population so robust? The answer lies in a combination of biological traits and human activities. Starlings are edge habitat specialists. They thrive in fragmented landscapes where agricultural land, urban development, and natural areas intersect. In other words, they love the modern American landscape. Every suburban neighborhood, every farm, every city park provides ideal starling habitat. We've essentially engineered the environment to favor them. Agricultural practices play a significant role. Industrial-scale feedlots, grain storage facilities, and monoculture farming provide abundant, concentrated food sources. Irrigation systems create lush, insect-rich environments, even in arid regions. The year-round availability of food means starlings can maintain high population densities without the seasonal die-offs that regulate many native bird species. Climate is another factor. Starlings are remarkably adaptable to temperature extremes. They survive harsh winters by roosting communally for warmth and shifting their diet to grains and livestock feed. In warmer climates, they breed earlier and more frequently. Climate change may actually be expanding suitable starling habitat, particularly in northern regions where milder winters reduce overwinter mortality. The absence of effective natural predators is crucial. In their native European range, starlings are preyed upon by a variety of raptors, mammals, and even larger birds. In North America, they face fewer threats. Hawks and owls do hunt starlings, but not in sufficient numbers to control the population. Domestic cats kill some, but starlings are wary and often roost in locations cats can't access. So what's being done to fight back?
The United States Department of Agriculture operates one of the most extensive bird damage management programs in the world. Through its Wildlife Services Division, the USDA uses a combination of lethal and non-lethal methods to control starling populations around agricultural and urban sites. Lethal control includes shooting, trapping, and the use of avicides like DRC-1339, a toxicant specifically formulated to target starlings and other pest birds. These operations are conducted under strict regulations and are typically deployed only in areas where starlings are causing significant economic damage.
Non-lethal methods focus on deterrence. Auditory deterrents like propane cannons, distress calls, and ultrasonic devices can temporarily scare starlings away from crops and structures. Visual deterrents like reflective tape, predator decoys, and laser systems are also used. Physical exclusion is highly effective but expensive. Netting can protect orchards and feedlots, but it requires significant upfront investment and maintenance. Structural modifications to buildings and bridges can eliminate roosting sites, but again, this is costly and labor-intensive. Biological control has been explored but remains limited. There's no practical way to introduce a starling-specific predator without risking further ecological disruption. Some researchers have investigated the use of reproductive inhibitors, chemicals that interfere with egg development, but these are not yet widely deployed. Habitat modification is another strategy. Reducing the availability of nesting cavities by sealing holes in buildings and installing nest box guards can limit starling reproduction. Changing agricultural practices, such as reducing spillage at feedlots and using bird-proof grain storage, can make environments less attractive to starlings. Community involvement is increasingly important. Citizen science projects track starling populations and nesting behavior. Local governments implement roosting site management programs. Farmers share information about effective deterrents and coordinate control efforts across regions. Despite all these efforts, the European starling population remains stable at around 200 million birds. Short of a continent-wide eradication campaign, which is neither feasible nor desirable given the potential for collateral damage to native species, the goal has shifted from elimination to management. The focus now is on reducing localized damage, protecting high-value crops, and preventing starlings from displacing native birds in critical habitats.
Hunting European starlings is one of the few invasive species control methods that is not only legal, but actively encouraged across the United States. Because starlings are classified as a non-native invasive species, they receive no federal protections under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. This means they can be hunted year-round in most states without a permit, and there are no bag limits. For hunters, this represents a unique opportunity to participate in conservation through population control while honing their shooting skills on a challenging and abundant target. Why is starling hunting considered ethical and ecologically beneficial? The reasoning is straightforward. Every starling removed from the population is one less bird competing with native species, consuming crops, or spreading disease. Unlike hunting native wildlife, where sustainable harvest is carefully managed to prevent population declines, starling hunting has no risk of overharvest. The population is so large and reproduces so quickly that even intensive hunting pressure has minimal impact on overall numbers. This makes starlings an ideal target for hunters who want to contribute to invasive species management without the ethical complexities that surround hunting native game. Hunting techniques vary depending on the environment and the hunter's goals. In agricultural areas, hunters often position themselves near feedlots, grain silos, or orchards where starlings congregate in large numbers. The most common method is pass shooting, where hunters wait for flocks to fly overhead and take shots as the birds pass. Starlings are fast, agile flyers, and hitting them consistently requires skill and practice.
Many hunters compare starling shooting to dove hunting, though starlings are generally more erratic in flight. Another popular technique is roosting site hunting. In the late afternoon and evening, starlings gather in massive communal roosts, often numbering in the tens of thousands. These roosts are typically located in dense trees, under bridges, or on tall structures. Hunters position themselves along the flight paths leading to these roosts and shoot as the birds arrive. This method can be highly productive, but it also requires awareness of surroundings and safe shooting practices. Urban and suburban roosts pose particular challenges due to proximity to buildings and people, and many municipalities restrict or prohibit firearm use in these areas.
Decoying is another effective strategy. Starlings are social birds and are attracted to the presence of other starlings. Hunters use realistic decoys, motion decoys, or even electronic callers that play starling vocalizations to lure birds into shooting range. This technique is particularly useful in open agricultural areas where natural cover is limited. The choice of firearm matters. Most starling hunters use shotguns with small shot sizes, typically number 7.5 or number 8 shot. These loads provide a dense pattern that increases the likelihood of hitting fast-moving birds while minimizing the risk of pellets traveling excessive distances. Some hunters prefer air rifles, particularly high-powered PCP air rifles that can deliver sufficient energy to humanely harvest starlings at ranges up to 50 yards. Air rifles are quieter than firearms, making them suitable for use in areas where noise is a concern. A smaller number of hunters use .22 caliber rimfire rifles for stationary shots, particularly when targeting starlings perched on power lines or structures, though this requires careful consideration of bullet trajectory and backstop. Safety is paramount. Starling hunting often occurs in or near populated areas, agricultural zones, and infrastructure sites. Hunters must be acutely aware of their surroundings, backstops, and local regulations. Shooting near livestock, buildings, or roads requires extra caution. Many hunters coordinate with landowners and agricultural operators to ensure their activities support rather than disrupt farm operations. The role of hunting in starling population control is often debated. Realistically, recreational hunting alone cannot significantly reduce the overall starling population. The reproductive rate is simply too high. However, localized hunting can provide meaningful relief for individual farms, feedlots, and orchards. A dedicated group of hunters can remove thousands of starlings from a specific area over the course of a season, reducing immediate damage and making the site less attractive to future flocks. When combined with other control methods like habitat modification and deterrence, hunting becomes a valuable component of an integrated pest management strategy. There's also an educational and community aspect to starling hunting. Many hunters view it as an opportunity to introduce new shooters to hunting in a low-pressure environment. Because starlings are abundant, unregulated, and considered pests, the activity lacks some of the emotional weight associated with hunting native game. Youth and novice hunters can practice fieldcraft, shooting skills, and ethical harvest techniques without the fear of violating complex regulations or harming conservation efforts. In this way, starling hunting serves as both a management tool and an entry point into broader hunting culture.
While recreational hunting plays a role in starling management, large-scale commercial harvesting and utilization of starlings represent a growing frontier in invasive species control. The concept is straightforward. If you can turn an ecological liability into a marketable product, you create economic incentives for sustained population reduction. This approach has been successfully applied to other invasive species like wild hogs, Asian carp, and lionfish, and there's increasing interest in applying it to starlings. Commercial starling harvesting is still a niche industry, but it's expanding. Professional harvesters operate primarily in regions with high starling densities and significant agricultural damage. They use a combination of trapping, netting, and shooting to capture or kill birds in large numbers.
Traps are often baited with grain and placed near feedlots or grain storage facilities. Once captured, starlings are either euthanized on-site or transported to processing facilities. Shooting operations are typically conducted under contract with farms, ranches, or government agencies. Harvesters use shotguns, air rifles, and sometimes suppressed firearms to minimize disturbance while maximizing harvest efficiency. The processing of starlings for meat is similar to that of other small game birds. Birds are plucked or skinned, eviscerated, and inspected for quality. The meat is lean and mild, with a flavor profile comparable to quail or squab. Because starlings are omnivores and often feed on grains and insects, their meat lacks the fishy taste sometimes associated with waterfowl. The breast meat is the most commonly used portion, though legs and whole carcasses are also processed. The primary markets for starling meat are pet food manufacturers, specialty restaurants, and exotic meat suppliers. Pet food is the largest segment. Starling meat is high in protein, low in fat, and free from the antibiotics and hormones found in industrially raised poultry. Some premium pet food brands market starling-based products as natural, ethically sourced alternatives to conventional meats. The exotic meat market is smaller but growing. A few high-end restaurants, particularly those focused on nose-to-tail cooking and sustainable sourcing, have experimented with starling dishes. The meat is typically prepared in ways similar to other small game birds, roasted, braised, or incorporated into pâtés and terrines. Bait suppliers represent another market. Whole starlings, or starling parts, are sold as bait for crab and lobster traps in coastal regions. Fishermen have found starling carcasses to be effective attractants, and they're often cheaper than traditional bait like herring or mackerel.
Beyond meat, starling byproducts have commercial applications. Feathers are used in the fly tying industry. Certain feathers from starlings have unique iridescence and texture that make them valuable for crafting fishing lures. While the market is small, specialty fly tying suppliers purchase processed feathers from harvesters. Rendered fat and offal are sometimes used in compost or as raw material for industrial processes, though these applications are less common. Regional differences in harvesting methods reflect variations in starling behavior, agricultural practices, and market demand. In the Midwest, where feedlot densities are high, commercial harvesting often focuses on trapping near cattle operations. In the Pacific Northwest, where fruit crops are a major concern, harvesters coordinate with orchard owners to conduct shooting operations during critical harvest windows. In the Southeast, where starling populations are dense but less economically damaging, commercial harvesting is less developed, and most control efforts remain recreational. The economic viability of commercial starling harvesting depends on several factors. Harvest efficiency is critical. Starlings are small birds, yielding only a few ounces of usable meat per carcass. To make harvesting profitable, operators need to process large numbers quickly and at low cost. Labor is the biggest expense, followed by transportation and processing. Market price for starling meat is relatively low, typically ranging from $1 to $3 per pound for wholesale buyers. This narrow profit margin means harvesters must operate at scale and maintain consistent supply chains. Why does utilization matter in the broader context of invasive species control? Creating economic value from invasive species generates sustained interest and investment in their removal. When there's a financial incentive, more people and organizations are willing to participate in control efforts. This is particularly important for species like starlings, where government funding for management is limited and often controversial. By developing markets for starling products, the burden of control shifts at least partially from taxpayers to private enterprise. It also helps reframe the invasive species narrative.
Instead of viewing starlings purely as pests to be eradicated, utilization approaches recognize them as a resource that can be managed and, to some degree, integrated into food systems. This model has implications for food security and sustainability. Invasive species represent vast, untapped sources of protein. In a world facing increasing pressure on conventional agriculture, making use of abundant invasive animals could alleviate some strain on ecosystems and reduce reliance on industrial livestock farming. Starlings, wild hogs, iguanas, carp, and other invasives collectively represent millions of tons of harvestable biomass. Developing infrastructure to utilize these species at scale could contribute to more resilient and diversified food systems.
The story of the European starling in North America is a stark reminder of how a single misguided decision can ripple across a continent for more than a century. Eugene Shefflin released 100 birds into Central Park because he loved Shakespeare. Today, 200 million starlings cause over $2 billion in damage annually, displace native species, and pose ongoing challenges to agriculture, aviation, and public health. It's a textbook example of ecological hubris, the belief that humans can transplant species across the world without consequence. But this story is also about resilience and adaptation. The starling adapted to a new continent with remarkable success. American farmers, scientists, and hunters have adapted their strategies in response. New industries have emerged, management techniques have evolved. We've learned, slowly and at great cost, that ecosystems are not static museums, but dynamic, interconnected systems where every introduced variable creates cascading effects. The question we're left with is not whether we can eradicate starlings, we almost certainly cannot, but how we choose to live with them. Do we continue managing them as purely a pest, spending billions on control efforts with limited long-term success? Or do we find ways to integrate them into our economic and ecological systems, turning an invasive species into a managed resource? The answer likely lies somewhere in between. Intensive control in high-value agricultural areas, utilization where economically viable, coexistence where the costs of control outweigh the benefits. There's a broader lesson here about our relationship with nature. Invasive species are, in almost every case, a problem of human making. We introduce them deliberately or accidentally. We create the conditions for their spread. We disrupt ecosystems to the point where invasives thrive and natives struggle. The starling crisis is not just an agricultural problem, it's a mirror reflecting our ongoing failure to anticipate the consequences of our actions. So here's the uncomfortable question that lingers. How many more starlings are we creating right now without even realizing it? What species are we moving across borders? What habitats are we fragmenting? What ecological balances are we tipping that will become the next billion-dollar disaster? If you found this investigation valuable, subscribe and join the conversation in the comments. What invasive species problem are we ignoring in your region? Let's keep asking the hard questions.